What's the weirdest thing you've ever had to split between siblings? I was eating Chinese takeout in my boxers when the lawyer called to tell me I needed to decide which sister got to birth our mother's frozen embryos. I choked on a piece of orange chicken and thought I was having a stroke, because surely those words didn't just come out of another human being's mouth in that order. The lawyer repeated himself slowly, like I was particularly stupid, and added that my mother had specifically named me executor of what she called her reproductive estate. She'd frozen 12 embryos 3 years ago with her boyfriend Craig, who was younger than me, and had abs you could wash laundry on, which I knew because he did CrossFit and wouldn't shut up about it. My sisters Claire and Ruby showed up at my apartment the next morning, armed with binders and wild eyes like feral raccoons who'd discovered coke. Claire, who was older by 18 months, immediately launched into a presentation about her superior health insurance and her yoga practice and her organic meal prep service that would nourish the embryos better. Ruby interrupted to point out that Claire's husband was having a midlife crisis and had just bought a motorcycle, and twin babies didn't need a father figure who might die doing wheelies on the interstate. They both turned to me expectantly while I sat there wondering if I could fake my own death and move to another country. The fertility clinic director explained that all 12 embryos were viable, and apparently our mother had tracked down the same egg donor she'd used 30 years ago for us, which meant these frozen embryos were our half-siblings with the same genetic mother, but Craig as the father instead of our dad. The donor had been a 23-year-old MIT student back then and was now a 53-year-old tech executive who'd been confused when contacted but agreed to provide more eggs one last time. Claire's face went through 17 different expressions before landing on, "I'm sorry, we're going to be raising our own half-siblings," and Ruby said, "Half-siblings with that CrossFit idiot as their father." And I sat there realizing our mother had created backup children using the same genetic recipe, but swapping out our dad for a guy who unironically said beast mode during fun time, according to Mom's wine-drunk oversharing. Craig had died 6 months ago in what I could only describe as the most Craig way possible, by falling off a mountain while taking a selfie for his Instagram fitness page. My mother's will stated that one daughter could have them all, and she'd left it to me to decide because I was the only one with any sense, which was hilarious, considering I'd just spent my rent money on a vintage arcade machine. Claire made her case over dinner with a PowerPoint about her financial stability and local private schools. I even got Mom's old fertility doctor to write a letter saying my uterus is spectacular, she said, sliding the document across the table, her husband Greg's expression unreadable. Ruby showed up halfway through dessert and said, "Did she tell you about Greg's secret gambling account?" And Greg threw a dinner roll at her face while I sat there thinking these embryos were better off in the freezer. Ruby argued, "Claire just wants them because she wants to win everything, but I actually want to be a mother, and we've got experience from raising 3 dogs together." I pointed out that dogs weren't human children, and she said, "Yeah, but these embryos are half Craig, so they're basically golden retrievers anyway," which was mean, but also pretty accurate. The estate lawyer said I had 30 days to decide, or the embryos went to research, and both sisters gasped like he'd suggested feeding puppies to sharks. Then they ambushed me at Mom's grave and made their final arguments while standing over her headstone. Ruby brought an emotional support baby she'd borrowed from her neighbor to prove she was good with kids. They were so busy arguing that they didn't notice the groundskeeper approaching until he said, "Ladies, I'm gonna need you to stop wrestling on the graves," because Claire had Ruby in a headlock while Ruby was trying to hit her with the borrowed baby's diaper bag. I made my decision at the clinic with both sisters present. "I've decided that Ruby should have the embryos," I said, and Claire made a sound like a deflating balloon while Ruby started crying and thanking me and God and Mom and even Craig. But then I added, "On one condition, because I'd learned something from Mom about reproductive drama. You can have 6 embryos and Claire gets the other 6, because Mom was wrong about keeping them together, and you both deserve the chance to be mothers, even if it means our family tree needs its own GPS system to navigate." The director said, "That's not what your mother wanted," and I said, "Yeah, well, Mom also wanted to make babies with a guy who had a tribal tattoo in Comic Sans font, so maybe her judgment wasn't perfect." The sisters looked at each other before Ruby said, "I get first pick of which embryos," and Claire said, "Like hell you do," and somehow that devolved into rock paper scissors best of 7, which Ruby won by throwing scissors 5 times in a row. They're both pregnant now with triplets, because of course the universe would make sure maximum chaos happened. My sisters keep asking me what we're supposed to tell these kids when they're old enough to understand that their biological parents are dead and their siblings are old enough to be their parents, and I told them to figure it out themselves because I'm moving to another country before I have to explain to 6 kids that our family tree more resembled a blackberry bush than a tree.